that wherever you live, whatever you do, there are opportunities to find other interests, and now that you're older, the time to take advantage of that is on you.
Absolutely. And I think you're exactly right. Doesn't matter where you are, there's an opportunity to do something new or something different or something you've always wanted to do that you never had time to do in the past. And I think that also goes, importantly enough, pretty much across the economic spectrum of our lives. That many things do not require that one have a lot of money or be very secure financially, that there are lots of things one can do that take very little money. My interest in gardening, for example,
right.
I know comes through in the book.
Yes, it does.
And obviously it doesn't take much money to get out and buy a few seeds and plant them and dig in the dirt, which I happen to enjoy doing immensely.
Well, of course, I had no idea that you were interested in gardening either. That surprises me less, for some reason, than your interest in country music. But again, that may be my perception of your image as opposed to the reality. But I did find, you were very revealing about yourself in this book, I think. Were you more revealing than you thought you'd be?
I'm a very reticent person talking. When I write, I feel completely different.
Do you?
I feel very free, very open. I've had people in Nashville say that they have known me for 35 years, but never knew me until they read this book.
Well,
that it came out then.
Right.
And interestingly enough, I've had the response has been interesting to me. Certain of my good friends never mentioned the book. And I don't think it was because the book was so bad. I think it was because I was so open in the book that it rather shocked
them. They're embarrassed to admit there's a Charles Wells there they didn't really know.
No, I think they're just embarrassed for me.
Well, for example, let me just, I would have never imagined that you had thought about the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it was not only something you once considered a long time ago, but it's something you thought about maybe not so long ago.
Not so long
and
ago.
Thought about doing maybe as another career after a career.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe to help enhance a career that's been dedicated to public service and people in need of help throughout. Now, talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, is that me missing you? Are you not telling?
I think it's my not telling. I've always felt, I suppose, that religious convictions are very private matters. And I've always been very wary of people who sort of display their convictions all the time. And so I think it's something I haven't talked about. But if I come to write about myself, that is indeed a very important part of my life. My daily life as well as my Sunday life. And so I think I feel somehow freer to express it when I write. It doesn't sound quite as much as though I'm saying, look at what a religious person I am. It's much more
no, it doesn't come across
the other
in
way.
that way at all. No, it doesn't. It just seemed to me that if you and I had had a dinner conversation or had been at a cocktail party,
mm-hmm.
the last thing you probably would have ever told me was that.
You're probably correct, although I might have mentioned that I have to be up tomorrow morning, being Sunday, to get to choir practice at 8:15.
Oh, absolutely. I have no doubt of that. I think you probably would. That probably would have come out. But that you had actually considered
the ministry itself.
Yeah.
Yes, I've done that several times.
The other thing that to be successful in a book like this, it strikes me that you really have to be candid, or it won't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's sort of another way of saying what I just said. You have to be willing to reveal yourself. You have to be willing to put something of yourself not on your sleeve, but on the printed page.
Mm-hmm.
And there is some risk in that, is there not? I mean, you have dealt with problems of the human mind throughout your career. You know far better than I how reticent some people are to open their lives literally like a book.
Yes.
You also, I'm sure, have tried to help people be more open and more candid when it was a problem for them. Now you have gone through this process, and I have just said that I find more there by far about you than I'd ever known. For example, I would never have guessed that it would have occurred to you to share household tasks. Now, that's unfair to you because, I guess because people of your generation, certainly my generation, simply didn't do that. I mean, it was another generation, this younger generation, my son's generation.
Yes.
Certainly, that's part of what they're about. But it seemed to me almost unseemly for Charles Wells to think about.
Maybe that's the reason some of my friends have not mentioned the book, is that it seems unseemly.
But talk about that. Talk about that whole concept of sharing with one's spouse responsibilities, duties, chores.
Well, certainly there have been periods of my life when I was so tied up with work I did very
Sure.
little at home.
Right.
There's no question about that. On the other hand, it's always seemed to me that marriage, if you like, and life within a marriage has to be based on being equal and taking equal responsibilities. And as I give up certain responsibilities with time, it seems to me perfectly reasonable that I take over some other things that I've let go, things that Ann has done for years perhaps, that I can take over now and give her time for other things. Because as I also mentioned in the book, we don't think of women retiring.
No, that's exactly right.
Who are not professionals.
Oh, that's
that is.
exactly right.
And yet, it seems to me that she should have more time as she grows older, as well as I do, to do things that she has not found time for. And one way to help that, of course, is to sort of share the household task. And I certainly wouldn't suggest that they're 50-50 at this point, but
Sure.
they've moved as I've got older.
Is that a suggestion that most people of your generation would find helpful?
I think it would, of course. Perhaps because I find it helpful for myself. But I think, again, in dealing with people as they've grown older, one thing that I've heard from women over and over again is that they have to keep doing everything. And he sits at home and looks at television or sits on the front porch and looks across the neighborhood,
Right.
And doesn't give me a bit of help. And I think it's a cause of a lot of resentment and a lot of anger. And indeed, again, in looking at people grow older, we become aware of how often marriages as a union disintegrate as people get older. They may not go out and get divorced because that may not be a part, even an option perhaps, for many people. But the marriage, nevertheless, I think often deteriorates. Because there's not enough give and take. There's not enough help on everyone's part. There's not enough respect, if you like, for the spouse. And so I make a point, I think, that, again, we need to change as we get older.
Speaking of helping with spouse's responsibilities. There is a very beautiful tribute in the book to Ann Wells for her help on Dear Old Man.
Yes, indeed.
Talk about that.
About that?
Yeah.
Well, I can put it very simply. No one wanted to publish Dear Old Man. I would send it off to publishers, and I would get back very nice letters that it was that they liked the book. But then along with it would come, but there is, it won't sell. Books about old age don't sell, period. And particularly books that have old in the title don't sell. And of course, where I came from was thinking of what we as younger people used to call our fathers. They were the old man.
Yeah, right.
O-L without a D, the old man. And so I wanted the title to suggest Dear Old Man,
Sure.
and indeed to put the emphasis on the dear.
Sure.
But it seems that the old got the emphasis.
Emerged, that's
and
right.
so after so many rejections, Anne said, well, I'll get busy and publish it for you, which indeed she did, getting the design and getting it put in shape to be published, getting the design done, getting it printed, and indeed then getting it out to stores.
You know, you're the second author who has been on this program who talked about the lack of marketability in titles that have to do with, quote, old, close quote, or age, quote, age, close
Yes.
quote. Betty Friedan, who wrote The Fountain of Age,
Yes.
was here, said the same thing. She had written The Feminine Mystique
Yes.
years before, had been a hit, had been a bestseller, is a national, continues to be a bestseller. Fountain of Age, agent said no, publisher said don't think so. And I take it that she finally convinced a major publisher that ageism was almost as bad as sexism, and she said, I couldn't get anybody to do The Feminine Mystique. If you'll publish this, it'll be a bestseller. Now, it has not become a bestseller,
Right.
but on the other hand, it makes the point, I think.
At least it's one that's commonly believed.
It
whether
is.
Whether it's accurate or not.
Well, and I'm
No,
sure
we
I
really don't know.
That's right, and I'm sure that but it would seem to me that given the number of people who are in our category, in my category, that a book like this would be of great value, and that it would have marketability.
Well, I think it has marketability. We really have done very well.
Yes.
In selling the book. And it seems to be of interest to people our age, if you like, those between 50 and 75
Yes.
particularly, and some very old people also seem to have read the book with great pleasure. I've heard from several of them that it just gave them great satisfaction, perhaps because I was saying the things they had already thought about.
Sure.
And they were glad to see it down on paper. But it has also seemed to mean something to people in their late 80s and early 90s.
There is one chapter called The Ultimate Loss of Freedom. And I think all of us grow up thinking of ourselves as free people,
Right.
recognizing that we're probably not as free as we like to be. We all have responsibilities, we have duties, we have obligations, we have families that, for one reason or another, seem to limit our freedom. We have job responsibilities that make it impossible for us to do what we would want to do. But you write about the ultimate loss of freedom, and it dawned on me that as you get older, you have to think about that. And what in your practice, your years of dealing with people, brought that to mind? The ultimate loss of freedom. Is there something about this approaching point of age that makes freedom more precious than it has been?
I'm not sure that it's more precious than it has been, but we don't think of losing it. until we get older, I think. And indeed, it is a very frightening thing to think of losing one's freedom, whether this is simply because one can't drive anymore, or whether it is because one has to go into a nursing home, or one has become totally dependent, whatever the setting for that may be. It's a very difficult thing, I think, for us to deal with. And I suppose if there are probably many faults in the book, but perhaps one thing that comes across a little too strong is the sense of stoicism that I think aging requires. That we have to put up with a lot as we get older, and perhaps the best thing we can try to do is to bear with it, live through it, if you like, with some grace, with some sense of humor, with some sense of kindness toward others, even though our lives may be miserable, and not let that turn us into crotchety old people who can't be pleased with anything and who are utterly miserable.
The other thing that you deal with, of course, is the relationship of older people with their children. It's not the only other thing you deal with, but it's a very important aspect of the book. Comes up again and again and again, as I certainly expected it would. But you might talk just a little bit about that, because it seems to me that there are crucial messages here that deal with the relationship of those who are aging with those who are young and worried about what age is doing. Right.
Well, I think as we grow older, we have to give up, if you like, the sense of power that we have over children. The children may be 40 or 60, it doesn't matter what the age is, that we have to give up this illusion of power, and that we should stop, if you like, giving advice, that we probably should stop being critical, and that as we see ourselves becoming more dependent, we may even have to give up the role of being father and mother and allow our children to assume those roles with us, which is, of course, a terribly difficult thing for almost all of us, I think.
I hate to think about it.
It's all right. But we do. And we need, I think, to, I won't say willingly give it up, but give it up graciously before it's forced on us.
And gracefully.
And gracefully.
Part of what the books, part of what the program is about, as you know, is to explore how writers write. And I wonder, here you are writing letters to yourself. Did you have a regimen to follow, or did you fit the writing in whenever you could?
I generally worked early in the morning, and for the years that I spent doing this, which took about 3 or 4 years with my full-time schedule otherwise, I would get up and write for about an hour in the morning before I did anything else. And I do find in writing this and in writing other things now that I write best in the mornings. So I try to set myself a schedule of spending so many days a week, which I will get up and write.
Do you rewrite much?
Oh, I rewrite a great deal.
Do you? You're not satisfied with it?
I'm seldom satisfied for a long, long time.
And do you accept editing well?
I accept it grudgingly, always grudgingly, but I can often say, yes, you're right. Doesn't mean it isn't grudgingly given, but yes, I can.
Having done one book, do you now intend to do another book?
Oh, yes. I have, actually, I have 3 or 4 books going at the moment.
Charles Wells, author of Dear Old Man, has been our guest on A Word on Words. Your host has been John Siegenthaler, chairman of the Freedom Forum First Amendment Center at Vanderbilt University. This program was produced in the studios of WDCN, Nashville.
This week on Channel 8.